everybody. So happy to be here with you, to be kicking off the LA part of your book tour.
Thank you.
Cindy's really someone who needs no introduction. I know that when I was growing up and I was getting into fashion, I had the slightest birthmark and I was darkening it with eyeliner because I really wanted your mole. But you know, you've certainly had quite a career. You know, one of the original supermodels. You had your own Pepsi Super Bowl commercial. You were in George Michael's video Freedom. Prince named a song after you. You were on the cover of Playboy twice. And you really paved the way for the model as brand phenomenon that we see so much of today by launching workout videos and a furniture collection and a skincare line. And now you've got a TV show in development, which we'll talk about later. But first of all, why don't we start in the beginning? Or why don't we start, first of all, with the book? Because on the eve of turning 50, you could have put out one of these, you know, cocktail books with 500 photos and no words, but that's not what you did. So what did you want to do with this book?
Right. Well, I never wanted to turn 50. Well, no, actually, I take that back because I realize the alternative is much worse. And it's like, as hard as it is, I think, to get older sometimes, you also realize what a blessing it is, because it is a blessing every day that you wake up. So, but I also really never imagined wanting to do a book. But a couple years ago, I was meeting with my publicist like I do every year at the beginning, in January, and kind of just looking ahead. And I had just done Oprah's master class. And the incredible thing about doing master class is they're so good. I thought, what do I have to say? I mean, Maya Angelou was on here, and I was like, what am I going to say that is, lessons that people can learn from? And the people that work for Oprah and do that master class, they do such an incredible job of holding up a mirror to you. And by the end of the experience, I thought, well, I actually have learned a thing or two along the way. So as we were having this meeting, she reminded me that I would be turning 50 soon. And were we going to do anything about that? And the idea of either running into a cave and hiding and just saying, well, had fun in the past, but now I'm, going to be like Bridget Bardot and disappear, is tempting. But I thought I would, this idea of a book, certainly it would contain photographs because that has been my career, but to couple them with little stories or essays about the lessons that I learned along the way. And to me, that made it something, that I was interested in, but also meaningful. Because, I mean, the pictures are great, but like I try to say to my kids, it's like, why does it all matter? Mm-hmm. And the reason it matters is the journey and what I learned and what the takeaway was and how I've grown as a woman. And that's why it's called Becoming, because, I mean, we're all constantly becoming the next version of ourselves. And I was a small town girl from DeKalb, Illinois, and became Cindy Crawford, but that Cindy Crawford is constantly evolving also.
Yeah. I was wondering how you say DeKalb, so I'm glad you said that first.
DeKalb. Okay, good. Yeah.
What was it like growing up there?
It was great. It was, it's a small town 60 miles straight west of Chicago. Had tons of cousins and aunts and uncles and relatives, so it felt very safe to grow up there. Was the type of place where your mom would say, don't come in until it's dark. And you could just play softball outside and 4th of July parades. And just very small town upbringing. Didn't lock our doors. It was great.
And so you were not discovered in a cornfield.
I worked in a cornfield. But I was not discovered in a cornfield.
What did you do in the cornfield?
Is anyone from the Midwest here? Okay, who has done detasseling? Okay, so detasseling for you non-Midwesterners is where you have to get the pollen off, sometimes you just snap the top of the corn off because you don't want it to cross-pollinate, which sounds very scientific, but it's just actually dirty field work. But I was in the research division, and there you would take bags and put over the tassels and collect that pollen, and then you would cross-pollinate it to like another row. But it was
sexy somehow.
Yeah, well, not sure, but it was, it was, first of all, it was like my first real job. So you learn how to, for minimum wage, and you learn the value of $1, and also how good it feels to make your own money. I think, we would work for maybe 4 weeks in the summer when the corn was at, the right stage. But you made the money that you made there, it was the money that you spent all through the rest of the year to buy your homecoming dress, to, I think I say in the book, it kept me in Suave shampoo for the rest of the year.
Small luxury.
Yeah.
And so how did the idea of modeling come to you? How did you even hear about it?
Yeah. It wasn't like it is now. I mean, I think because of like Tyra's show, America's Next Top Model, and certainly because of social media, young people today think, everyone's really a model in their own life because you're doing selfies or whatever. But then, I mean, I really didn't even look at magazines. My mother didn't buy fashion magazines. I knew 17 magazine, and Phoebe Cates was like the cover model at the time. And Brooke Shields had just done those Calvin Klein jean ads. So, I kind of knew a little bit about it, but for a girl from Illinois, it was like, how do you get from there to New York? It wasn't something I ever considered. But there was a photographer in my town, just the local guy who shot everything. And he asked to take my picture for the college newspaper. And my parents were like, of course, suspicious. And they accompanied me on the photo shoot.
Oh, they did.
But that was like the first little tiny step. And there were many steps between that and Vogue. People think, oh, she was in a cornfield and then she was on the cover of Vogue. And that's not quite how it happened. But that was like my first little inkling, oh, what is this? You can take pictures and someone will pay you for it?
Yeah. And, as cool as I thought it would be to be a model when I was a teenager, you kind of got made fun of. And in fact, the first time you ever thought you had a modeling gig, you showed up at a department store and it turned out that these mean girls from school were playing a prank on you, right?
Yes. I know. And the reason I actually share that story is because I had done a talk at the Boys and Girls Club in Malibu a couple years ago, and we did a great event where it was like called Life is Your Runway, Life is My Runway, and we did a fashion show with all these high school students and let them have that experience of walking down a runway. And the incredible thing was at the beginning of the week, no one wanted to walk out by themselves. They all were like, no, I want to walk out with my friend. And I had Miss J. Alexander, who's, if you've seen America's Next Top Model, he was on that. And he always taught models how to runway model. And we would be like, come on, you got to go out there and flaunt it. And by the end of the week, every kid, they wanted their solo time on the runway, which was incredible. But I told them this story of how when I was in high school, I got a call from this department store. They said they wanted me to be their model, and I was, very excited. I put my cowl neck on, put my hair in hot curlers, went to the store, and I walked in. I said, hi, I'm here for the modeling job. And the people were like, what are you talking about? And I was like, no, you guys called me. And they're like, no, we don't know what you're talking about. And I was like so embarrassed. And I walked out and I saw these two, and I won't say the word for it, but girls from my high school standing there, and they were laughing like they wanted to humiliate me, and they did. Then I saw them 10 years later at my high school reunion. Who was laughing then?
Nice.
But I shared that story because I think that, look, we all have that. We all have a version of high school mean girls or bullying or whatever. And I just think it's important for people, yes, I made it, but you don't make it without a few bruises along the way.
Yeah. So you weren't the prettiest girl in school. I mean, you must have had like a million invitations to the prom and all that, right?
I had the quarterback, but yes.
All right.
But in my high school, like the homecoming queen, and like it was like my friends who I just saw when I was in Chicago last week. they were twins and they were like more cheerleader and cute. And that was like in my high school what was considered hot.
Yeah.
I was tall and it just, I wasn't like an ugly duckling, but I certainly wasn't like prom queen, cheerleader, all of that stuff. But I had a good high school experience other than, the occasional mean girl stuff.
Right, right. And so the first modeling agent you went to really did suggest that you get your mole removed, right?
Yes.
Wow.
I was encouraged by these hairdressers they were like, you should be a model, And so I just got the yellow pages and looked up agencies in Chicago and, kind of just went through alphabetically, called, see who I could get an appointment with. And my parents came with me, and the first agency, they were like, yeah, well, you might want to have that mole removed, but we'll do a test shoot anyway. And I said to my mom, see, I told you I've been hating that mole my whole life, and I got teased about it.
Yeah, what was the name they called it? They used to
Well, my sister said if it's on the right side, it's a beauty mark, but on the left mark, they said it's an ugly mark. And then in high school, people would be like, hey, you have chocolate on your face, whatever,
Yeah.
And, and again, like, the thing is now, as a 49-year-old woman, like, looking back, and again, why to include that in the book, is that sometimes the thing that you think is maybe a flaw or that you're most self-conscious about, it ends up being the thing that makes you memorable or makes people connect to you. Like you were saying, even when you started following fashion, you would darken your mole.
Yeah.
So I think that's important for everyone, but especially young people to hear, like, embrace the thing that makes you different.
Yeah.
If we're all the same, it's kind of boring.
Yeah. And there does seem to be sort of more of a climate for that now, right?
I definitely, ideally, and I do see it sometimes, that the idea of beauty is broadening to include, even just different body types, different ethnicity, that we don't only see. I felt like the generation of models before me was primarily, you would have fit right in. Blonde hair, blue-eyed, it was like the Christy Brinkley and Cheryl Tiegs and everything. And then all of a sudden, my group came along and there was Naomi and Christy Turlington and Linda, who, was a chameleon and looked different all the time. But so many brunettes were like, thank God, like, finally, like a brunette, and there's so many women that are brunettes. So I like when I see, this idea of beauty being more encompassing.
Yeah. So the first photographer that you worked with in Chicago, his name was Victor. Help me with
Srebneski.
I can't say
Yeah,
it.
it's hard.
And you learned a lot from him, but eventually you kind of had to leave him. Talk a little bit about that, because I think that's something people can relate to, where you sort of have a point in your career where you've gotten far enough with someone and then you have to move on.
Yeah, really, Victor Srebneski was, he still is and was the biggest photographer in Chicago. And he was my first mentor. I learned so much from him. And he was very, very patient, but also very strict teacher. And he really taught me how to model, which is a lot more than just looking a certain way and standing there. You have to be aware of the light and how to make the clothes look good and all these things. But my agency had a sister agency in New York, and they were wooing me to New York. And the kind of jobs that I could get as a model in New York were more exciting, bigger, paid more. And eventually I had to leave. And you would want your mentor to be like, fly away, little bird. And I think, maybe that's what parents are for, hopefully. But my mentor was not that excited about me leaving Chicago. I think, he had felt like he had created me and wanted me to stay. And actually said to me that, besides that, he said, if I go, he'll never work with me again. But he also told me that I didn't have an easy face to photograph. And that he was the only one that knew how to make me look good. And part of me believed him, it was very scary to leave, because I thought, wow, I have a good thing going in Chicago. I'm working almost every day with this guy. was a gamble.
Yeah.
But, you know, I did take that gamble, and it worked out okay.
Yeah. I love how you say you really had to learn how to model. And I did a story with you for the LA Times, and I got to watch you at a photo shoot and really sort of working the camera. How do you work the camera? Like, show us. I mean, if someone was taking your picture, give us the secret. No, I mean, you know, where do you look to the light, and how do you know?
Well, I mean, there's so many things, and in the book I kind of go through all these amazing photographers that I've worked with, and from each one I learned something different. So I would say, you know, one thing as a model I'm aware of is where the light is, right? So if it's there, you want to make sure that you're using the light to your advantage.
Okay.
But then the other thing, and I think someone like Irving Penn taught me this, is that you look at the clothes. What are the clothes about? I mean, as a model, your job is to sell the clothes.
Right.
It's not really about you. And so it's like, if it's a skirt with, you know, with a lot of fabric, you'll probably want to move so that you show that. Or if it's about a strong shoulder, you would want to show that. It's having, you know, it's learning about the clothes, learning about the light. Also, remember when you do a picture, you're working in 2 dimensions. So you have to learn how to fill the space, because what might look good from this angle is very different from that angle. So if I think this is the page, I'm going to want to fill the page in a way, make an interesting shape for the photographer, help them tell the story of the clothes. I mean, really modeling and fashion photography is storytelling.
Yeah. Yeah.
So.
Well, let's cut to some of the photos in the book that you can walk us through, and maybe you can tell us kind of some of the secrets behind how you created the images.
This one's don't let your mother cut your hair. Or let your grandmother make you your little jumpsuit. Actually, my sisters and my grandmother made 3 of those in 3 different sizes. So I actually have a picture where we're all wearing those.
Did your you made your clothes when you were growing
My
up?
grandmother would make a lot of our clothes, and then she made our Barbies matching clothes, which was amazing.
I love that.
Yeah.
I love that. Okay. What's the next one?
That was, I think, my kindergarten picture. Okay, now I'm not in kindergarten anymore. This is by photographer Arthur Elgort, and I talk about Arthur as the storyteller. I named all these photographers that were so instrumental in my career. And Arthur is completely opposite than some of the most, you know, the previous photographers that I had learned from were more old school, where you're very still, you're very posed, you're like a mannequin almost. And Arthur, he loves to put you in a situation, and he'll like want you to run and jump and laugh, and he's just like click, 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 click. And probably 99 out of the 100 pictures don't look good. Mm-hmm. But then there's that one, and that was at a rodeo in Cheyenne, Wyoming.
Oh, cool.
And those were like the real rodeo guys. And we thought, we were like, these guys
were
are
excited.
so cute. And then we all went out that night, and they showed up like without their hats on. They looked completely different. It was like in their element when they're riding the bulls and all that. We were like, these guys are hot. And then we show up at like the club later, and they're all like in their Wranglers and like no hats, and we were like, wait, where are the guys that were riding the bulls? We want those guys.
They were trying too hard.
They were all cleaned up.
Okay.
Helmut Newton. Who likes Helmut Newton? He was a master in so many ways. But I think the most fun with working with Helmut is he liked to challenge people. You know, he definitely. So many photographers today will be like, "This is so Helmut. Is that working out?" And I'm like, not really. I mean, because Helmut wasn't trying to do Helmut. Helmut really, he had this very internal storyline going on. And when we were shooting this, he was like, "You're a widow." And then he's like, but he was really rich, and he left, you know. And as everything he said, it was because he wanted you to react. He wanted to see that thought in your eyes or expression, and then he would be like, "And you have a young lover," you know. So, and it was just so much fun working with him. I mean, that same shoot, and I think part of the reason he did this is we were shooting for MTV at the same time, and he had me standing, I was in a swimsuits mostly, and he put out a hat, and he would have people like give like 20 francs or 100 francs, and they could get their Polaroid taken with me. And then he actually kept their money, and then we used it to buy lunch. But he just did it to mess with people. He had such a, I don't know, and I would always tease them. I said, "Helmet, you're not putting a saddle on me."
Yeah, I was
You're
wondering,
not
did he ever make you wear a
spanking
saddle?
me. No.
Okay.
But it was all, it never felt weird. It was because you kind of, and knowing where you said you were just in Berlin and saw his museum, and you kind of understand the world that he grew up in and what influenced his work. And that's why I think no one does Helmet like Helmet, because it was real to him.
Yeah. I want to ask, I mean, has a photographer ever done anything that's made you uncomfortable or made you have to walk away, asked you to do anything like that?
The only time I left a job was when someone had really, really bad lighting on me, and I just called my agent. I was like, I cannot deal with this. I'm leaving. That's truly the only time I've left.
Yeah.
But there's been times where people have asked me to do things, and once in a while I've done them, and those are the pictures that I regret.
Yeah.
And they're not the ones that you would think. They're not like Playboy or anything like that. But sometimes because when you do a picture like Playboy, if you're working with a photographer that you really trust and you have a great relationship with, I never felt violated or cheapened or anything. But there's been other times where I don't know, I did a picture once like holding a gun, and I'm like, why? It didn't feel right at the time, and then I was like, why did I do that? And then there's been crazy things they've asked me to do, like, well, once and I tell the story in the book, how we were locked in a steam, I was in a steam, and they were shooting through the door, so the camera was in front of the door, and I was like, I need to come out now, I'm like getting lightheaded, and the photographer didn't like open the door. And I was like, really? And I passed out. But it was a good lesson, because I learned like, oh, I have to, like, not everyone's nice like they are in the Midwest, and I have to look out for myself, and I have to take care of myself. And then now when people ask me to do really ridiculous things, I just say, gosh, I don't understand. Can you show me? and then they're like, oh, just forget it. So anyway, good tip.
And speaking of Playboy, I think this next photo is not from Playboy, but is by Herb Ritz, who was kind of maybe your spiritual brother, it sounds like. Yeah. And he shot your Playboy photos. But talk a little bit about him and sort of why you related so much to him.
Well, Herb is the LA boy. But Herb really, two things about Herb. One is his family was in design, so he really, he looked sometimes at bodies like architecture. It wasn't sexual for him. It was like, he'd just see the body as a shape. But also Herb, because he grew up in LA and around famous people, he loved that. And he wanted everyone to be that. Like, he wanted Madonna to be the most Madonna-y she could be. Or he would want, like, Arnold Schwarzenegger. And he would have these incredible parties, and it would be, like, from John Kennedy Jr. to Tracy Chapman to Warren Beatty. I mean, it was just, like, they were fantastic. And I never heard Herb say a bad word about anybody. He like loved it all. And I think that really comes across in the way that he photographs people. It's like he's celebrating kind of the myth of the subject.
And you said he photographed you the way that you'd want to wake up in the morning, right?
Yeah, like a picture like that. I mean, it's kind of like you feel like you're not wearing any hair or makeup. I'm sure it was 2 hours of hair and makeup later, but the idea is that it doesn't look like it.
Yeah.
And he could do that because his light was so beautiful, and he captured. I mean, it's funny because it looks like he's just clicking away, more like Arthur Elgort, but it's not.
Yeah.
It was a very different rhythm. It was very intentional. It was a slower camera that Herb shot with, but there was at the right times there was a playfulness to his work as well.
Talk about that shoot that you think about when you drive past the Pepperdine every time.
Well, one of the first times I worked with Herb, and it was before really either one of us were famous, it was for, I think, Reebok. And it was at Pepperdine University, and he had me like, like when you're a kid and you roll down a grass hill and you just roll and roll. I was doing that over and over again in like Reebok clothes. And I live in Malibu, so I drive by that hill a lot. And Herb had a place in Malibu, and Herb and I were very good friends. And my kids remember Herb, and like pretty much every time I drive by that hill in Malibu, which is often because it's on my way home, I think of Herb, especially if the light is like the golden hour, which kind of Herb was famous for, that beautiful golden light that everyone looks good in.
Yeah, yeah. And so the Playboy shoot, did it take you a long time to come to that decision, like, all right, I'm going to do this?
I think I say in the book, it all starts with like, can you do that raincoat like with nothing underneath it? And you're like, yeah, sure. And then they're like, can you just like take it off one shoulder? And next thing you know, you're like standing there buck naked. So my first time doing a nude was for French Elle. I was 18 years old. It was a spa story, and it was like sitting from the side, very discreet. So like I got eased into it. And then I don't know, it's surprising to me because I didn't grow up in like the south of France where people go topless or anything like that. But I just felt with the right photographers, I always felt comfortable. Playboy was a little bit different, not because of the nudity, but because of the connotation of Playboy. And look, now even Playboy's not putting nude pictures in their magazine anymore.
Yeah.
I don't think my dad was that thrilled.
Did you have to talk to him about how was that conversation?
I told him after the fact, but before it came out, because I'm like, I just want to warn you.
Yeah.
And I said, look at the pictures first, because I don't think they're anything. If they would have been in Vogue or French, they probably wouldn't have been in American Vogue. But if they would have been in French Vogue, I don't think anyone would have, Playboy. But just the idea of Playboy. And they're beautiful black and white images, and I had control. That was the thing. I said I don't care about the money the first time around. I said I just want to make sure that I can kill the story if I don't like it. So Herb and I were going to Hawaii anyway for another job. We did a day and a half of Playboy, and then when he showed me the images, I was like, yeah, they're great. I love them.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Jumping ahead, your kids have started to model recently, including Kaya, your daughter, who's 15, 14?
She's 14.
Yeah, and it's like a dead ringer for you, except without the mole.
I know, my son actually has one.
But if she wants to do Playboy?
Kaya's 14, so now doing now it won't, look, I'm even just not struggling. I'm trying to help her stay 14 for as long as possible, until she's 15. But also, and then when she's 15, I'll help her stay 15. But also, she has had a couple really unique and great opportunities, with photographers like Bruce Weber and Stephen Meisel, and I would do those jobs. Yeah. So I'm like, if she is going to go down that road, it's great for her to have great teachers.
Yeah.
But I think anything beyond a little thing here and there is so far in the future.
Yeah. But you must have had a good experience sort of overall with your career to say, yes, do this. Pursue it. Did you have any reservations at all about,
I didn't say yes, pursue it.
Yeah.
But I would feel like a hypocrite if I told her, you can't model. Because it has been great for me.
Yeah.
I got to travel the world.
Yeah.
I got to gain financial independence. I feel like it's a great finishing school in a way. I met incredible people from all over the world. It's been great for me. I also feel like I had a good head on my shoulders. I had a solid kind of upbringing. And if my main job as a mom is to, give her that unconditional love, teach her, just how to be a good human being in the world.
Yeah.
And then, whatever she wants to pursue, I can help guide her. And if she does pursue modeling, I feel like I'm a really good resource
Yeah.
for her to have, because I can help her make decisions. So,
Yeah.
and I didn't have, I didn't have. It has it has been good. I also was, I was much greener than she was, much more naive,
Yeah.
much more unsophisticated. But I also was a little bit older. I didn't start modeling until I was almost 17, and I didn't move to New York till I was 20.
Yeah.
So I'd had other jobs and all
like
that.
corn shucking.
Corn
Yeah,
shucking, babysitting,
Yeah.
house cleaning,
Yeah.
worked in a store.
Yeah. And how do you think modeling has changed? Now I mentioned before there's a lot of sort of model moguls who have, I don't know, clothing lines or cookie businesses or whatever. What do you think the biggest difference is, or what are some of the differences?
Well, I mean, I don't think the experience of modeling is any different. If
Yeah.
you're in front of a camera, you're in front of a camera. So modeling has not changed. The business of modeling and maybe the way that a model approaches her career is different. And I think certainly the fact that the young models have social media is such a huge, I think, advantage and responsibility.
Yeah.
But it's a great way for them to not rely on others. Is this too? I feel like I'm getting feedback. To not rely on others to say who they are. Like a model like Cara Delevingne, right? Like she can look, be wearing a couture gown, and that's the way a photographer sees her. But then she can be who she wants on her social media. And I think that kind of direct relationship with your fans is great.
Yeah.
And I think some of them are managing it so well. And I do think because of kind of my generation of models, the new models, they're looking. When I started modeling, the idea was, okay, you could till you're 25, and then you better think about getting a real job.
Right.
And then I remember thinking when I was 25, I was like, oh gosh, I could probably keep this going for 5 more years.
Yeah.
And I was 30, and then at 30, I was like, it's for sure going to be over when I'm 35. And then at 35, I was like, when I'm 40, and certainly the jobs I'm doing are different. But to me, if you're in front of a camera, that's modeling.
Yeah.
And I'm still doing that for Meaningful Beauty, for my furniture line, for all the book stuff that I've been doing, for Omega watches. And I do think that the young models and their agents are aware that if you really make good choices now, you can start to build this idea of a brand, like who am I, what do I stand for? And some of the things that I did along the way that before anyone talked about brand building were like to do my exercise video, because that was like, oh, she cares about fitness. And, to do Meaningful Beauty, like all of those things started telling people what I'm passionate about and what I care about.
And so how do you feel about aging now that you're about to turn 50? How do you feel about your body image, and how do you feel about plastic surgery? Would you ever get it? That kind of a thing.
How do I feel about, I talk a lot about body image in the book, and especially now as a mother of a 14-year-old daughter, I try to not talk about it, if you know what I mean. Because
Right.
I think it's really important. It's very confusing to your daughter if you say, you're beautiful just the way you are, but my legs look fat in these jeans, or I was going to say something else, but whatever. If you're picking yourself apart, but telling your daughter she's perfect the way she is, what do you think she hears?
Right.
She doesn't hear that she's perfect the way. So I really try as a mother I might have those thoughts about myself, as we all do. We're all insecure at times, but I really try to not put that out there in the world.
Yeah.
And on aging, it's the same. It's kind of what I said in the beginning. there are a lot of gifts that come with age, believe it or not. And I remember being 20 and going, yeah, that's what they're just saying because they're not young anymore. But there really are. I mean, I think that you just you're much more comfortable in your own skin, even maybe because it's looser. I don't know. There is definitely, I don't know, I'm finding parts of it are a little, you're like, oh, huh, that's different than it was last year. But other parts, you're like, I feel great, and I think the key is, yes, taking care of yourself and all that, but it's like if you're doing work that you love, if you have relationships that feed you, if you, get excited and have gratitude, all of those things, you just are like, it's all good, it's fine.
So would you have Botox or plastic surgery or?
Oh my gosh. Wow, Booth. It's like, it's
not that you need it, for
but
God's
here's
sake.
the thing. When I was young, same thing. I would be like, I would never do that. And I think I'm old enough now. I never thought I'd have to color my hair every 3 weeks either. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's just like I've learned to not really have judgments about that because I think I don't know, it's very personal, and I think everyone needs to, the idea is, and I was talking about this with a group of women today who've been using Meaningful Beauty a long time. It's like the only thing that matters about beauty is that it gives you confidence. So like when you have a good hair day, you walk out the door and you just like, you feel better about yourself. So I think that goes with all beauty. It's like, it shouldn't feel like pressure. When you're a kid and you play dress up, it's fun. It's like, oh, I'm gonna walk around in my mom's heels and this is fun. And the second that it stops being fun, then we shouldn't really do it. But I think the whole idea of fashion magazines and beauty is like, hey, this could be fun, like try this on. If it doesn't fit, you don't have to go for it.
Right. And I'm curious, what do you think about fashion? I mean, having spent all these years making all of us want these things, like me, are you a passionate fan of fashion? Do you have a lot of clothes?
I'm not. It's funny because I did the show on MTV called House of Style for many years, and the producer of that show was a total fashionista. She just knew every new designer, and she loved it. And I love fashion, and I appreciate the art of fashion. And because of my job, I get to wear I've worn every designer in my own life. I mean, I live in Malibu, so it's like jeans and like a t-shirt, and if I'm feeling really fancy, a pair of heels, that's really all I need. I love fashion, but we were talking earlier, I think almost as I get older, I almost want like a uniform.
Yeah.
Because it's like, even for me, sometimes it feels like pressure. And also, I do know what I feel comfortable in now. I know what I feel like myself in. Mm-hmm. And so when I'm not on a shoot wearing whatever they tell me, basically, then I want clothes that I feel like me in.
Mm-hmm. And tell us about what you're excited to do next. You have a TV show that you're consulting on or developing. Mm-hmm. It's about modeling.
Well, yes, I'm getting a lot more credit for this than I deserve, really. But Anne Hesh, who you guys, I'm sure, know, she approached me. They had an idea to do a TV show kind of in the style of like Empire, or but about the fashion industry in the late 70s, early 80s, which was, the 70s was before I was there, but I came to New York in 86. And they asked me to be a consultant because they wanted to know about, like, for instance, a photographer would never actually say make love to the camera. Only on TV or in a movie would that ever happen. I mean,
Right.
Photographers don't talk that way for the most part. If they did, then that would make me want to walk off set. So they just wanted someone who had access, by the way, like to agents and people who were around at that time, and also to suggest story ideas, like things that possibly happened to me or happened to someone I know that they could use to write into the story. So I'm mostly working as a consultant and with the writer to come up with, oh, it would be funny if this, like I tell crazy things that happen to me.
Tell us, like, what's
Well,
the crazy?
I mean, like there's one really long one, but a short one would be like, just like, there was something like a guy getting into my luggage, like baggage handlers, and they, you know, because you used to have your name on the luggage, and they would take out certain items of clothing.
Right.
So just things like that either happen to me or I've heard of happening to other models that would just be kind of good background thing, but I'm not a writer, nor, you know, I mean, well, I wrote a book, but I'm not a TV writer.
Right.
And I'm not, you know, it wasn't like my idea to do the show, but I think it could be fun to,
Yeah.
you know, to use things, you know, all these experiences that I've had, and some of them are in the book, but then there's so many that aren't,
Yeah.
that could somehow work their way into.
I'm sure they want a lot of like the debaucherous kind of stories, right? Like people, you know.
Yeah, then they
having
hired the
sex in
wrong girl.
closet, right?
Yeah, I
So-
was not that girl
Yeah,
ever. No.
you never got tempted to, I don't know, like drink champagne all night and whatever.
Well, that's not that debauchery.
Right.
I mean, come on, that's not debauchery.
Right.
I think I just wasn't the party girl, so even though I'm sure it was around me, I was, you know, my husband's like, you're so naive. I think because I wasn't looking for it, it didn't really find me.
Yeah.
Yeah, so.
Yeah. Okay, I think we're going to move to questions, actually, I'm sure people have many that I haven't asked.
If you have a question, raise your hand. Just a quick reminder, they start generally with a W or an H, and sometimes a D. Only Booth gets to ask follow-up questions, and there is no such thing as a two-part question.
I'd just like to know how your brand really has come through so many, I don't want to say decades like you're so old, but I mean, there are a lot of models over the years that you just never see again. And what led you to the furniture, to the makeup and everything else?
I think, I mean, part of it's just luck, honestly, but I think the fact that normally the decisions I made about where I was placing my energies reflected who I was at the time. So I wasn't trying to be on the cover of Sports Illustrated at 40. I was doing, you know, when I had kids, I associated with a baby company. And then like the furniture line, happened more around 42 when it's like, yeah, like this makes sense because I'm a wife and mother and homemaker also. My skincare line was after having been a model for Revlon for many years for someone else's company, and then when that, you know, when we decided not to go forward with that, people said, you should do your own makeup line, but I was like, I'm really more interested, as a model, I'm interested in skin care. Like, that's my job, to show up with good skin. So I feel like people know when you're being authentic and when you're not. And so I wasn't trying to sell something that was very disconnected to me. I was always doing stuff that I felt made sense for who I was. And I think that's what helped enable it to go. And I think also that I was always very professional. I always showed up on time. I did what I say I was going to do. So companies like Omega Watches, like I've been working with them for over 20 years because, you know, I do what I say, you know. That's the other advice I give young models. She's out there somewhere. I saw her. Treat it like a job.
Yeah.
It's a job.
Yeah.
It's not a lifestyle. So show up on time.
It's not a lifestyle.
Be prepared, and that will help.
And I'm curious if you ever thought about designing clothes. You know, you mentioned wanting a uniform.
I've been approached a couple times, and I kind of go through this every couple of years. But so far, in order for me to like put my name on something and my energy behind something, I feel like I need to have something to say
Yeah.
that's unique. And I just haven't figured that out yet. and so I may never.
What about the Cindy Crawford sweatshirt?
Ah,
There's a uniform.
I know.
Everyone's been
That would
very
be
good.
actually, I should just get one in every color, and that could be my uniform.
There you go.
Hi, Cindy. So you've been in front of numerous photographers, some who are very technically proficient and some who are flamboyant and fun and fabulous, right? What makes a good photographer great?
Well, I mean, that's a tough question, because to work with as a model, what makes a photographer great, for me anyway, is just having that rapport with the photographer, that they communicate with me, that, you know, some photographers, you get up there and they don't say anything and you're like, I'm not like a wind-up toy. Like, do you want me to smile? Do you want me to look at the camera or not look at, you know, it's like, and I love photographers that give me direction, but then some of the younger photographers I feel that have only shot digital, they don't give you a chance to model. They've already laid out the picture exactly what they want, and basically they just say, okay, like they've had like their assistant already do the pose and everything, and then they just want you to step in and do it. And I'm like, I mean, I'll do it, but I'm like, that's not that fun. It's like, I actually feel like I can bring something more to this picture. So sometimes it's like telling me what you want, but then letting me play too. And you might hate everything I do, but at least I feel like I'm bringing my skills. In terms of like what the world thinks is a great photographer, I think the test of time. I think like, for instance, like there's certain, like an Annie Leibovitz, like her pictures just, they get better with age. They're even maybe, you know, sometimes I feel like some of her images, maybe at the time I was like, oh, that wasn't the prettiest picture of a person or whatever, but then you look at it 10 years later and you're like, she captured something, you know, and each one is different. Like what made Irving Penn great is different than what made Helmut Newton great. But having worked with so many of the greats, I think that they trusted their aesthetic. They weren't trying to do, and it kind of goes to your question too, if you're trying to do something that, I remember once I was doing a Revlon job and they hired Bruce Weber, but they were trying to have Bruce do Herbert's pictures. I'm like, if you want Herbert's pictures, like hire Herb, like let Bruce do Bruce. No one does Bruce better than Bruce. No one did Herb better than Herb. And I think the greatest photographers, they know who they are and what they love. And sometimes when you're working on advertising with a client, you have to maybe go a little bit in another direction, but they still, for the most part, are clear about what they do.
A good point of view.
Yeah.
Like. Yeah.
Hi, Cindy. First of all, I want to say I grew up being a tomboy, but the video of Freedom totally changed me. I love that video. It's amazing. But I wanted to say you were part of a group. I remember in the 80s, 90s, you were called the supermodels. You, Linda, Naomi, all the rest of the girls, you guys were the supermodels. And somewhere along the way, that kind of just went away. Mm-hmm. I don't know who we would call a supermodel now because there seems to be so many great models. Who do you look at and say, wow, she's really got that supermodel-esque persona, and you know, what makes you look at that model?
I think there was like a time where, you're right, there was like our group, and I think in some way, some of the designers or fashion powerful people, they felt like, oh wait, we created monsters, and now what do we do? Like they're asking for Concord and they're asking for all this money, and so there was like, we're not going to do that again. Well, that was stupid. So there was like this time where there wasn't like the supermodels, but I think this new group is incredible. I think there is. I mean, I think from Gigi Hadid to Kendall Jenner to Karlie Kloss to Coco to Cara. I think there is, and what I think makes them interesting is they all have their personality, like, and they're able to show that through their social media. So, and they kind of like look good. It reminds me a lot of like the women that I modeled with, that they don't all look the same. They're not all from the same they're not all Brazilian. They're not all, from, like, there was a time where it was like all about the Brazilian models, and there was like a couple years it was all about the Russian model, and there was all about this. And now it's like, again, it's kind of like all over again, but they all look good together. I mean, if you look at the Taylor Swift video that I had a little cameo in, you see like this group of women again that I think they all look, they look great together, but they're all their own thing.
And that was sort of the dawn of the supermodel. That was really one shoot, right? It was a British Vogue shoot.
That
right?
was like the beginning of it was the British Vogue shoot, and then kind of then the George Michael video, and then finally to that Versace show where we all, skipped out together.
Did you guys all like each other? You didn't compete?
Look, I say no. I mean, we all liked each other.
Yeah.
Certainly, you like some people more than others, and I would say like models are people too, and there's like some that you get along with better than others. But in terms of like people think, oh, like we were sabotaging each other backstage at fashion shows and things, and that just wasn't true at all. I mean, we would have fun when we were together, and you were never like, oh gosh, I wish you wouldn't have done that job. But I would see like a beautiful story maybe that Christy Turlington had done with Stephen Meisel, and you would think, oh, I wish I could have done that. It's so great. But it wasn't like, oh, I wish Christy hadn't done it. It was more like, that was a great story. I wish I would have got booked for that.
Another question back here.
Hi. Can you share a fun memory or story from back in the 90s with all the other supermodels?
Oh my gosh.
What about the Versace show?
Yeah, I mean, we had really, like, everyone thinks we were together all the time, and you were really only together during show season.
Yeah.
Because during the rest of the year, you would be flying off here, and the other ones would be flying off there. I'm trying to think of that as the story that I can tell. I don't have like a funny story that I can tell, sorry.
Because even for the Freedom video, you guys weren't together, right?
No, when we shot the Freedom video, it was over like 2 or 3 days. David Fincher shot it, which a lot of people don't realize. And like I showed up and just did my part, they threw me in a tub. And then they had like a towel on my head, and I was like, really? Like, is this sexy? I don't know. But then when I saw the whole thing cut together, it was pretty cool. But we weren't overlapping.
Yeah.
So, yeah. I'll have to think on that. If one pops into my head, I'll say it.
Over here on your left.
Oh, hi.
Hey, Cindy. I wanted to know a little bit about working with Scavullo and Bill King. What was it like shooting your first Cosmo cover? And you did so many.
Scavullo, did
Yes.
you say first? Oh. I almost
No one ever asked you that.
No, it's funny because I had originally written about Scavullo just because he was such a character. But then I was really trying to include lessons. And Scavullo, I mean, it was Cosmo covers, yeah, and it was like, like hair, boobs, like fierceness. It was like they were a kind of Jessica Rabbit version of womanhood. And it was fun. It was like a fun idea to play that, Not for Cosmo covers. He was actually very low. And it would be, the funny thing about that is there's this one makeup artist, Fran Cooper, and Scavullo would always want you, like, his lighting was a little, it was not the kind of lighting I was used to, and he would always want you looking down, but then the makeup artist would be standing behind him going, keep your chin up, and then Scavullo, so I'd be like this, and he'd be like, put your chin down, and then I'd see Fran going, chin up, and I was like, because you trust the makeup artist, because they're the ones like telling you where the lighting's good. Like a lot of times the makeup artist is standing behind the photographer going, or like the stylist, or that's the other thing, it is a team. It's of course the model and photographer, but there's also the hair, the makeup, the editor, and sometimes those people are standing behind the photographer, like giving you ideas, or like the editor will come in, because a lot of the editors used to be models, like Jenny Capitan, and they'll give you suggestions on what to do, and if you're smart, you listen. because they know and they're looking at the image. And then Bill King was amazing. He loved movement, as you know from his work, and I would have included Bill more in the book. I wanted to, but I think all of his archives, a lot of them were destroyed in a fire. But he was that very late 80s, like the running mid-step kind of like, but they were great. And one of my favorite French Vogue covers I ever did was with Bill King.
For questions?
What could you tell us about your tequila company with George Clooney?
Well, it's actually my husband's tequila company with George Clooney, but I guess by marriage I'm, guilty as charged. It's good. Tastes really good.
It is. It's good. I've had it.
The way I like to drink it is the Reposado on the rocks. So
I was reading. I read a story somewhere where you guys had so much tequila one night that you ended up in bed with George Clooney.
yes, well, I did not have any tequila that night.
Oh, okay. So he
I'm
ended up
not
in bed with
speaking
you.
of the other two. Well, yeah, I mean, we did make a little kind of spoofy commercial about it. What happened was Randy and George had been out drinking. And then my husband was out, so my kids ended up in bed with me. And I woke up at like midnight and I was like, where's Randy? Like, did he come home? And sometimes if he comes home late and I'm already asleep, he would just go to sleep in the guest room. So I went to go in the guest room to get in bed with him. And as I was getting in bed with him, all of a sudden, because there's like a guy laying on the bed, it looks like my husband. And it wasn't. It was George. And I think he was more embarrassed than I was. I mean, he was like, oh my God, I'm so sorry. And I was like, I'm so sorry. And I like run out of the room. And then I find my husband. I'm like, he was in my daughter's room. I was like one of those nights where musical beds. I don't know if that happens to anyone with kids. But my kids, when they were little especially, would like to come in our room. And I was like, I can't believe you didn't tell me George was spending the night. And then Randy and I start laughing, and then George hears us, and then the three of us just went downstairs in our kitchen, and we just laughed about it the rest of the night. We were like, this would be a great commercial for Casamigos. And then we did like a little commercial on it, so it's funny. So it's true, but it's not as juicy as it sounds.
You're left. We have the final question.
Hi, Cindy. My question is, having lived the life you've had, the many experiences you've had from being a small town girl to a beauty icon is going to go down in history. This is probably, the best supermodel. What is the one best message that you can impart to the girls of like my generation who face so much pressure on beauty and self-acceptance?
Well, I think, I'm trying to do that with my own daughter. And I think it's, think about how when you see your friends and you compliment them, when you look at your friends, you're like, I love your dress, I love your lipstick, or you look great, or have you been working out, whatever it is. And why can't we do that to ourselves? Like, and I think, just to be kinder to ourselves, I think that's the only way, because there's always, look, it doesn't matter who you are. There's always someone with longer legs or better skin or shinier hair. It's really annoying when it's your 14-year-old daughter, let me tell you. But there's always someone we compare ourselves to, and I think, why can't we just all embrace our own beauty? And it's hard sometimes, but you have to. I think the best way by doing that is thinking about all the things you are grateful for, and then that kind of let that be the forefront of your mind, and then no one's perfect, and that's okay.
Thank you.